All right, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Marvel Buddies. It's me this time, Micro, and clearly by the screen, we are covering Nova #1. Um, Now this character's been around for a while, a long time, um, and I know that a lot of you guys have wanted that like extra long episode for next week. And I have a plan on introducing you guys to a new superhero team, but I have to kind of break down the members of that team. And we started with Ms. Marvel a couple weeks ago, or a couple episodes back. Um, so this week, I figured we'd continue on the coverage of those characters by talking about Nova, specifically Sam Alexander, who debuted in Marvel's Point One, #1, by Jeff Loeb and Ed McGuinness on November of 2012. But we're not starting with that comic. We're actually starting with Nova #1 because that's his definitive backstory. And now a couple of you guys who know Nova might be thinking of a different kind of Nova. Um, we are covering Sam Alexander, the modern version of Nova, not the original version of Nova, who was Richard Rider, debuted longer than Sam Alexander. But with Sam, the powers are basically the same. In case anyone wants to know Nova's powers, he puts on the helmet and he gets cosmic kind of like flight, and he's pretty invulnerable. He can still take damage, but it's not as much. Um, but yeah, we start actually not with Sam, but with his father Jesse. Here he is. And they're on a alien space planet, I guess. Above the planet Moro, 42 light years away from Earth, 17 years ago. And it's him and his team taking on these aliens. I'm pretty sure these are the Badoon Hunters. And what do you know? You get two extra people coming along. It's Gamora and Rocket, which is down here, and they're taking on the Badoons. And the whole thing is kind of like a story that um, Sam's dad Jesse is telling him. He's pretty much talking about how the Guardians of the Galaxy, superpowered, blah blah blah, and how he leads them out into salvation. They get stopped by the ship, and Richard does like this, or I'm sorry, Jesse does this like suicide dash into the spaceship and blows it up, and he gets saved by his other buddy, and the two of them end up like escaping with the Guardians. And on their escape, his buddy injects him with the serum that kind of like depowers him, and he starts to remember where he is. And he's actually back on Earth with Sam in Arizona, carefree Arizona, um, where he was like telling him the story while fixing the bathroom at Sam's school. And Sam's like, he gets thrown up, whatever. And Sam's like, all right, let's get you home. And Jesse's telling him like one day they'll come for me. I'm telling you they'll have to come eventually for me. And the two of them are pretty much just like Sam is kind of for a 15-year-old taking care of his father who's still living in the stars pretty much. But the whole time Sam's just like, yeah, sure they will. A bunch of stories that you keep telling me that are probably a load of bullshit, right? While his dad kind of slowly gets dragged back over to their house. And he tells him like, I'll tell mom you're in the garage again, and he lays down and here's all his like stuff, like space charts and whatnot. And he knocks out. Here's the helmet. I mean, we all know it's probably most of it is true, but to Sam, it's just a load of stories that he tells to like, he believes that it's a bunch of stories being told to Pat to like, give off the feeling that he's not really a loser. But yeah, Sam, he goes into his fridge and he's like, looking for food, and his mom's there telling him like, oh, your dad's, going through a tough time. Not as not as tough as when he went up the against the Badoons, as he's kind of making fun of him. Um, and she's like, they're kind of like upset at each other. She knows that he actually did this, but Sam's kind of like it's a bunch of bull crap. And in comes his sister, Kaylin, and she's like, I want some ice cream. She's like, you can have anything. It's all make believe anyway. And he heads off back to bed. The next day, he's on his way to class. He's late and he gets kind of beat up by this bully. Two of them are like, oh, I just made a mess in the can there. You want to get your dad to work on it?" And he's like, "Oh, get one of your skater boys to follow you around with a pooper scooper." And he's like, "Oh, you think you're better than me just because your dad's a janitor?" And he's like, "Oh, it's a custodial engineer." And principal comes, tries to break up the fight. He takes it and heads off. And it's funny because the principal's like, "Get yourself a helmet." And we all know by the fact that Sam is Nova that he eventually does. And he's skating off, and there's this girl from his class. She's like, "Oh, you're gonna clean the bathroom again?" He's like, "You know about that?" And he's like, "Yeah, that you're covering for your dad so he doesn't get fired." She's like, I could help if you want." And he's like, "Why would you do that?" And she's like, "Oh, it's something to do." And he's like, "It's this place is really dead. If the cutest girl in school would clean toilets, is something to do." And she's like, "Oh, you think I'm cute?" Kind of like building on their character development. He's like, Sam and um, I forgot her name. Very unimportant. Carrie, yeah, Sam and Carrie talking about their relationship and their dynamic. And Sam heads back off to school or to home, and his dad is kind of retelling a different story, where he's on the by the Rigelian system, and this is like right when Sam's about to be born. They're telling him like, "Oh, they stole this recorder," and they're taking us to you know, we're taking an awful lot of like Rack getting shot by the other aliens. This is the recorder, the kind of like goofy dude back there. And he's like, "Look, we're gonna land down so that Jesse can leave. You got to take a Skinner and leave the nearest jump point." And he's like, I can't leave you in the middle of this." And he's like, "You guys have no choice. You got to go." And kick him out. And he's like, "Don't send any gold domes for." And he's like, I promise I'll be back as soon as." And they cut him off. They're like, "Go." And then he finishes telling the story to Kaylin. He's like, "I got home just in time to see your brother get born 15 years ago. Sometimes it feels like a long time, like it was yet, or and sometimes it feels like it was yesterday." And she's like, "What happened to Titus and Master Z's and the Flish?" And she starts doing that whole like and she knocks out. And he's like, "Tell me another story about Rocket." She's like, "Tomorrow, now I'll race you to Sleepy Town." And here's Sam watching over, and his mom kind of like stops him. He's like, he can't even remember the same story that he tells. Just because she sees your dad as a hero doesn't mean he's wrong. He's like a talking raccoon and a green lady assassin, right? Like, I mean, if you think about it, these are like to a person who's never seen, the Guardians of the Galaxy or the Nova Corps. This is the things that make sense, right? It's like a talking raccoon and a green lady assassin. Like, these are fantasies to Sam, and he's like he's like, he's filling your head with fantasies, and mom's like, he's filling your head with dreams. He's like, he's a loser. When are you going to face the fact? And then his mom really gets pissed, and she's like, "You have no idea the sacrifices he made. I hope you grow up to be the half the man your father is." And Sam takes that to heart, right? He's like, "Wow, half a high school janitor. You go me." And he takes a skateboard and skates off. He's like, "Must be nice to put on a space helmet and leave town." If that's what you guys think of me, if you're expecting to me to be like half of a high school janitor. He's skating off, and he's like, "I'm just gonna wind up." And he makes it to the end of town before heading back to see his sister, who's kind of like crying, and she's like, "I can't sleep." And he's like, "I'm worried about dad." And he's like, "Don't worry about him. I'm taking care of him." And she tells him like, "You're just a kid, and what happens if the Nova comes back? He's gonna have to go." He's like, and Sam, he wants to tell her like, those stories are not real, but he stops, and she keeps again like believing in dad being the greatest Nova ever. And he takes her hand, and she's like, you should get him to tell him about the one that when they painted another ring around Sanard. That's a good one. And um, the next day he goes to school, and he realizes dad kind of messed up. This is your fault. There's like a damn, I didn't include the picture, but there's supposed to be like some tape around it. And he's like, "This is your fault, Alexander. If your old man doesn't show up, you're on duty." And they get into a fight, him and this guy. He's like, "Oh, my office." I'm pretty sure his name. He has like a really lame name. Anyway, the two of them start fighting, and Sam comes back because he got suspended, and he's like, "Hope you're happy." And then he realizes there's this giant hole in the wall, and the helmet's missing. He's like, "What the hell happened?" And he's like, "No, you're not running out on us." So he leaves and tries to hunt them down, but when he gets on his skateboard, he kind of trips and bangs his head, and he blacks out. He breaks a couple of things. The doctor tells him, he's like, "Welcome back. Don't try to sit up. You took a nasty spell. You're in the hospital. Sam, you've been out for a couple of days." And his sister's kind of like, "Can I see the cool stitches?" And she's like, she tells him like, "Dad's not home yet." And he's like, "No, get some rest." And then she starts hearing whispers. It's him. How should I know, what it says on the chart? It looks like, the scribbles of a Shiarian child. She's like, that's the doctor's handwriting. I hate hospitals. And you end up realizing that it's Rocket and Gamora, in their more iconic outfits. Gamora never really wore much clothes, and Rocket had a very Star-Lord-esque looking outfit. Um, his comic costume was like just this blue, and here they ended up redoing it for the movie, but it was very much, um here he has a it's kind of like the one they have leaks of it. It's kind of like this one right there. It's the blue, like the blue onesie with like the red linings on the outside. Let's see if they have like a better image. Uh, Oops, that's the kind of like this one right here. Oh no, that's the original. God, I'm messing up on this one. Here it is. Um, Terrible picture. Let's see. Because most of them are just like his old outfit. They end up redoing it, but let's sure you guys get the point. Kind of like this. Yeah, it's like a toy, but I like the stand, I guess. But yeah, that's kind of like the original Star-Lord-esque outfit, and that's kind of like what Rocket makes his suit out of. Um, it's very very like classic, very old school. This one here, that that right there. That's the original like Star-Lord outfit. But yeah, that's Rocket and Gamora here, and Sam kind of like wakes up. He's like, "Wow, what's going on?" And they have his helmet, his dad's helmet. He's like, "Yeah, it was your father's helmet. That's why we came here, kid." And he's like, "Wait, what are you saying?" And he's like, "Why did you call me?" This can't be real. And he kind of ticks him off because he calls him a talking raccoon. And Rocket gets like pissed off and he pulls out one of his guns and he's like, nobody calls me that. And she's like, you got to stop this now. And he's like, no, this can't be real. It's like, what are you thinking? And she's like, you could have killed him. And he's like, he came at me first. And she's like, with a pillow. And he, runs off. And he's like, what difference does it make? Did you see him? He's got none of what his father has. She's like, I don't care. He's our last hope. And he runs off trying to find like a nurse. And when he does, she kind of gets like confused. Like, so you said they had a gun, and they make their way into the room back to try and find Rocket and Gamora, and they see nothing. She's like, I swear I saw them. She's like, Mr. Alexander, that you got a nasty bump. Why don't you just go back to sleep? I'm gonna give you something to help you sleep, and he knocks out. But they leave the helmet under his bed, and when he wakes up, it starts to like light up, and he takes it, and he's like, it's a joke, it's a bad nightmare, and he kind of like kicks it off. But then when he turns around and heads back, the helmet starts to glow and radiate, and he goes back and picks it up, and he's like, great, great, I broke it the second he picks it up, but then he puts it back on. He's like, what's the worst that can happen? And his body starts to change into the outfit of the Nova Corps. So it's like full body outfit. He's in the gold and black, and he starts hearing a message, and it's like Sam, and he's like, oh, it's my dad. He's like, dad, and he's like, if you're seeing this, then, and it starts like cutting off. It's like, it's like, it didn't go as planned. He's like, I can hear you, can you hear me? It's like, I'm giving the helmet to Rocket and Gamora. Whatever you do, trust them. You say trust them or don't trust them. I can't hear me. This is some kind of recording. It's like the power of the Nova helmet, yours to discover. Wish I had more time. Explain. It'll only work for you and my DNA signature. And he's like, oh, dad. And he's like, I know I haven't been the best father. He's like, oh, please don't say that. He's like, I wanted to be there more for you, your mom and your sister. I'm sorry I burdened you with this. You've taken so much on. I know I never said it enough, but I love you, son. And Sam starts to tear up and he puts his hand out and the message disappears. He's like, hey, hey, and he starts kind of like slipping back down to earth and crashes. And there's another panel where the car alarm goes off. And when his mom comes to visit, the doctor tells him, he's like, I don't know, there has to be some explanation. He's like, I wish I had one, but Mrs. Alexander, but I think you'd be happy to hear that your son is in perfect condition. The helmet kind of healed him completely back up. No fractures, no signs of trauma. He's actually better condition than he was when we checked him in. Forgive me for not, believing in medical miracles. Maybe we should run more tests. He's like, I'm afraid I have no cause for that. I've already discharged them, and he heads off. And Sam asks is like, hey, any word from dad? And she tells him not yet. And he's like, I'm glad you're okay. She tells him like, I have to go pick up your sister. She was happy to see you. You sure you don't want to come? I don't like leaving you alone. Typical mom stuff. And she tells him like, oh Sam, you left your skateboard. And he just kind of walks in and stares at the helmet, kind of reminiscing about his dad. Could play the recording. I'm just supposed to believe that you were some kind of outer space marine. And this helmet, like, does it come with instructions? And he takes it. I guess I gotta put you back on, and he does. And again, slowly, and you can see the transformation happening individually of the like specific armor pieces coming on. And he finally takes it and he starts floating, but he crashes back down again. And so he tells him like, no, I gotta do this. And he slowly starts to fly, and he zips off, but not before his mom kind of sees him flying off. And you know he kind of does what his powers are intended. He puts the helmet and pretty much turns into a flying rocket ship, indestructible, moves at light speed, and he ends up moving so fast that he crashes down into the moon. And who else would be there to meet him but Uatu the Watcher? Kind of puts his hand out, and he's like, "Oh hey, Mr. Moonman," because of course he's 15 and doesn't know who the Guardians are. He's gonna know less about the Watcher, and he's like, do you speak English? Do you speak at all? Say something. And he just kind of points out into the galaxy, and he's like, oh, you want me to look out there? What am I looking at? There's nothing much but a bunch of stars and a you know bald guy that's pointing at me. And he's like, I'm kind of new at this, like not like really new, like less than an hour. Can you give me like a hint? And he starts looking into the Watcher's eyes, and he notices what seems to be spaceships. They're very specific spaceships that we'll see later. Um, and he tells them like, it's out there. What does that mean? Are those spaceships coming here? Is that bad? Is it good? What are you telling me? Why are you telling me this? You don't even know me. And he's like, I'm guessing that's bad, which probably says a lot more about me than I want to think about right now. And he's like, I don't know who or what you are, like an alien or a god or whatever, but I guess all you can do is point. So, okay, the pointer on the moon, I'm gonna go, I guess, find something, find help or something, or tell the Avengers, which I have no idea how to do. And he comes back and he's like, oh, I'm Sam, by the way, Sam Alexander. I don't know if I'm supposed to tell you this, but I think you already knew. And he just kind of zips off, and he lands, and he tries not to crash, and he doesn't. Successfully ends up landing and heading back in, and that's when his mom kind of starts yelling at him in Spanish because she's Hispanic. And she's like, "Oh, Samuel Alejandro, ¿dónde estás?" And he's kind of like, "I don't really speak that much Spanish." He's like, "You just came out of the hospital. Acabas de salir del hospital. Your sister was wanting to spend a while with you when you recovered after and then you just disappeared." And he's like, "I understood some of that, but not all of it." She's saying it in Spanish. I was in the garage looking through that stuff. I thought I might find something that would help us find him, like where he went, and I must have fallen asleep. She tells him, "You want me to make you something to eat?" He's like, "No, I'm good." And she's like, "Turn off the lights when you come up." And she tells him like, "Your dad sometimes, he visited, or he'd go away for a while like this, mostly before you were born. No matter what else you think of him, after you were born, he tried so hard. He tried to be a good father." And he tells him like, is there something you're not telling me? And she's like, is there something you're not telling me? We all know that he's hiding the fact that he's Nova from his mom. He's like, is there something you want to tell me? You can. It's like, your dad always did. And he looks back at her, and then he goes back to the helmet, and he's like, Dad. He kind of tries to knock on it, hoping to get like another message from his dad. He's like, who am I supposed to talk about this stuff? Did you tell mom? Does she know? Um, did she know that all the stories you've been telling me since I was a kid might be true? Not might. And then he turns around and sees Rocket and Gamora again. He's like, your father was a great man, and maybe with a little help you could be too. And then Rocket just breaks down in laughter. He's like, I can't say it with a straight face. He's like, Rocket, yeah, yeah, sorry. And he runs out and tries to hit Rocket, but kind of trips on his way out. And Rocket, pulls a gun out on him. He's like, you got your dad's guts, I'll give you that. He's like, what the hell do you know about my dad? And he's like, I know I'm the reason he's not here anymore, and why I'm stuck talking to you. Where is he? Where's my dad? And how'd you get his helmet? He's like, he gave it to me. He said he had instructions for you and only you. And he's like, did it? He's like, well, I guess. He's like, you guess. Gamora and I didn't come halfway across the universe to waste our time. There are 3 billion people depending on you. Not that, there's any pressure or anything. He's like, I didn't ask for this until I met you. A talking raccoon and a green lady. I thought my dad was nuts. look, I might live in a tiny town, but I've heard of Nova. There's another one here on this planet. He was like a young Avenger or something. Why don't you go get him? And of course, he's referring to Richard Rider, which Gamora references, and he's like, and your behavior, is an insult to a sacrifice. At this point in time in 2012, to bring Sam, they had Richard Rider, killed off, along with the rest of the Nova Corps. Like it or not, you're our last best hope, so suit up. And he puts the helmet back on. Obviously, he's like, we're gonna train you, and it's not like any of us get a choice. And of course, they start training. Rocket pulls out his guns and starts shooting at him. He's like, this is a disaster. I think I'm missing a math test. And he's like, yeah, wow, I can't believe I just said that. Like anyone would ever want to take a math test over being a superhero. Anyway, um, he, crashes. Like Rocket tells him, like, lesson one: don't trust anybody. Your closest friends, your oldest ally, even and especially your family. Avoid anybody can be turned. And he's like, are you crazy? You're gonna kill me? And he's like, there's only one person you can trust, you can depend on, and that's you. And he gets kind of like upset and tackles Rocket, and he's like, you, you got it. This is me smoking your furry tail. And he drops him, and he's like, new lesson: don't shoot at me. And Gamora comes and slashes at him, and she's like, what's next? And she's like, finish your enemy. Like, whoa, wait, I'm not gonna kill anybody. And Gamora tells him, in war, it's not your choice. Um, then I don't want to, play this anymore. And he's like, I'm supposed to be in school. And Rocket's like, school, you fail, and there's no Earth. And he's like, the helmet will protect you and allow you to fly in space, in outer space, and breathe. But you're by no means invulnerable. And you know kicks in Sam. And he's like, you couldn't just text me this stuff. And then Rocket picks him up, and he's like, do you think we believe in you? We don't, but your father did, and for now that has to be enough. And he kind of is like feeling the pain of it. He's like, worst Nova ever. It's like, okay, stop, enough. You've proved your point, Deadly Green Assassin lady and Talking Raccoon. You can kick my butt. Um, and Rocket tells him the Chitauri will not be as forgiving. Or Gamora, your death will be swift and painful. And he's like, the what? And she's like, the Chitauri, an alien race that lives, that exists for war. They're here. They're why we came for your father, and in return, why we had to resort to you. They have gained some sort of something called the ultimate nullifier, and they plan on using Earth as its test case. And he asks, like, why us? There's a lot of stuff to unpackage in that, like, one panel, two panels, I guess. Um, so the Chitauri, if you guys remember, the alien race that attacks in the Avengers, they're coming, and they have the ultimate nullifier. Now, if you guys remember from our Fantastic Four episode when we covered Galactus, um, the ultimate nullifier was the weapon that Johnny Storm used to fly across. He flew across the galaxy for, and it can alter reality. Um, so they plan on using the ultimate nullifier to and test it on Earth, which they have, or at least some sort of copy of it. And Rocket tells them, like, believe it or not, whenever there's a hostile takeover in outer space, Kree, Skrull, Shi'ar, Badoons, Galactus, even Thanos himself, somebody from Earth shows up and spoils it. So the Chitauri, with their entire freaking armada, are heading over here to make sure that never happens again. It's like, wait, armada, like a whole big fleet of ships that look like whales, only totally badass. Why didn't you tell me? I saw them, or the pointer on the moon showed them to me. And he's like, the pointer, giant bald toga, and he's like, you mean the Watcher? Okay, the Watcher, whatever. He's like, what do you mean you saw them? That's impossible. They're cloaked. How is the Watcher involved? Did he say anything? I don't know. And no. He's like, it's got to be the helmet. Novus could see things in space nobody else could. If he actually saw them and the helmet lodged the coordinates, then all we have to do is get him to space jump there. Plans have changed. Forget about battle. You're about to be a scout, and we need to know how many ships and how far away. Once you've reached a specific velocity, you should be able to space jump. Don't engage. They'll be cloaked, and you'll be tiny. Maybe they won't notice you. Mark their position on in the quadrant, and I'll do our best to bring in reinforcements. He's like, awesome, sounds like a plan. I only have a question. What's a space jump? And he ends up doing it, and pretty much a space jump is when he flies fast enough to go into hyperspace, warp speed, wormhole, whatever nonsense. He's pretty much traveling so fast, he's moving from one point in space to another. Um, like every other sci-fi mechanic trope has. And he ends up making it all the way to Jupiter, where you can see the giant whale Chitauri towers are, and he's like, guys, I'm all the way out in Jupiter, and I think it's bad. It's like really bad, and they end up firing a giant laser beam at him, and he's like knocked out, and they ask him, do you want the body? He's like, I'll do what you want with the body, but I want the helmet intact. He's like, it looks dead and looks like a shell. That's why there's a reason. This is like written really weird. Reason to fear this one. And he, wakes up suckers and he's flying through them, kind of like dive bombing through them. And he tells them like, look, I know I only acted as a scout, but I actually did listen to all those stories about my dad and all them novas. So I take out the mothership, and the rest of these badasses aren't so badassery. All I have to do is find the generator, the power core, this thingy that runs the beast, and the problem is solved Nova style. And he dives bomb in, boom, explosion, and the second he gets in, he gets stopped. He's like, how much alike you and your father are, and he ends up finding this guy, who is also a Nova. He's like, diving headfirst into a situation you can barely understand. How sweet your death will be as I tear your helmet from your head. And that is Titus, the guy from before, the one that injected him and told him to head off. Um, he's like, I know you're Titus. You were the one of the black novas or supernovas or whatever. You were like my dad's best friend. What happened to you? He's like, he spoke of me, did he? Of our years together as Nova soldiers, how we risked our lives for our souls for the greater good of the universe. He's like, did he tell you of his betrayal to us? And he's like, that's a lie. And he's like, your father was a coward. He's like, he thought they were we thought they were Rigelians coming for us for the recorder, but they were far worse with the weapons we had encountered. They knew nothing of the mission raiders who wanted the ship, the Shatari harbingers of death, and they ended up like stabbing his arm and shooting him in the eye or whatever. They got proposed a bargain for my life. I have something that's it's far more worse than this worse on the ship. A Rigelian recorder, that coffin that's in there. If anyone other than myself opens it, it'll detonate, destroying the ship and everyone on board. But with a little help, we can learn the secrets that it holds. And they end up finding out that it's the ultimate nullifier, and they plan on using it. So we can destroy an empire or create a new one. The future is mine to shape. It's like, liar, do they know your Shatari pals, how you sold out the Novas and how you'll sell them out too? And he's like, why would anyone aboard this fleet ever listen to you? I've lived within the Shatari ranks. They've rebuilt my body, given me a weapon that will crush the through your Nova Force, just as I did when your pathetic father challenged me less than a week ago. He's like, only this time I'll keep his helmet. And he's like, no. He gets upset and kind of like melts his way down. He's like, no, go find him. I will have that helmet before the night is done. He's like, I don't think so. And he ends up blasting back in, grabbing the ultimate nullifier, and then blasting straight back out. And he's trying to contact Rocket and Gamora. Is the boy he something apart something hard to read in Chitauri. And he's like, you guys promised to help. You guys promised to bring help. You guys promised to bring me help, and he is blasting off. The Chitauri are on their little kind of speeder bikes chasing after him. It's like, I could use a little Guardians of the Sam Alexander. And he's like, he blasts off and he's like, report, where is he? Where's Nova? And he's like, sir, he vanished and he has the weapon. And Titus gets upset and he ends up back on Earth and he's like, I did it. And he's like, oh God, what have I done? Hey, Rocket and Gamora, if you can hear me, I really hope you can. We have to meet at my house like now. And he lands right back at his house, takes off the helmet. He's like, Dad, I need to talk to you right now. Titus said that but I know you're alive, okay? I did this thing and I think you'll be proud of me, but he's like, here's a shocker to no one. I didn't really think it through. Any ideas were to hide a weapon that could blow up the Earth? And he's like, all right, fine. I need to find a place to hide it until Rocket and Gamora gets here. They'll know what to do with it. And he's like, under the bed. And he's like, under the car. He's like, no. And he's like, I'll just throw it in the trash and make sure to pick it up on Tuesday. Right? Like, flawless plan. And he heads back to bed, exhausted, and his mom's like, Sam, you fell asleep in the garage again? He's like, something like that. Yeah. And he's like, your dad used to tell me stories like that a lot. And he's like, look, I'm not. And he ends up seeing the glow outside, and he's like, I'll be right back. And he's like, wait. He's like, what took you so long? I never thought I'd be happy to see a green lady assassin and a talking raccoon. But he ends up realizing that it's actually Titus, and he has the helmet, and he's like, give me what I came for, boy, or I'll have this entire town burned to the ground and everyone you ever cared with it. He's like, you're wrong, Titus. Don't take another step. He's like, what would you do, Sprout? Talk me to death like your father. Your father liked to talk as well, but not anymore. And he's like, you will turn over the ultimate nullifier, and I'll consider not destroying you. And he kicks the skateboard, and it ends up smacking the helmet off of Titus's hands. Sam grabs it, puts it on, and hits him with like the biggest blast ever. And he's like, did I mean, the mission. I mean, there's not even any fur balls left. I gotta get. I gotta. I gotta suck. My bad. I got a sick feeling if I blast him out of town, meaning he'll be back. We need a new plan, which means it sounded like I had a plan in the first place. And he ends up grabbing the ultimate nullifier, but from the corner, his mom is there, and he sees her and just blasts off. And he ends up heading to the skateboard town where that like bully kid was named Carl. Yeah, it was a stupid name. Um, and he ends up landing there. You know, big ass explosion. There's where Titus was, and there's Nova, and he's like, sit in, step away from the alien being, tiger thing, and he's like, there's danger, and there she is. He's like, no way. It's like little different, Titus. When I'm ready for you, and he's like, you will not disrespect me. What is it? Who are you? Are you on TV? And he's like, didn't you hear me, kids? And he's like, run away, go. And he's like, you are like your father in another way. And he's like, you actually care for these humans. And he starts like blasting at him. And he just blasts at Carrie, and he ends up like going supernova or whatever, blasting into him and like launching him into space. And they're like, that was amazing. No one's gonna believe us. And the other guy's like, dude, did you wet yourself? And he ends up like flying with them, like holding on. He's like, you space jumped us back here. My army will obliterate you. And he's like, believe it or not, I've actually got a plan. And he's like, I'll tear your helmet from your head. And he's like, then you won't be able to breathe in outer space. And he's like, not every life, you think you know so little about the universe to think that your human biology applies to all life forms. It's like, okay, so I got a C in biology, but it doesn't take a math genius to know I win. The ultimate nullifier, he's like, you have no inkling. He's like, shut it. All anybody's done since this nightmare began is tell me I don't know what I'm doing. The last thing I ever wanted was to be like my dad, and now for the first time I realize how lucky it'd be if I was half the man he was. Here's how this is gonna go down. You go back to your whale mobile, and there all your little Chitari and she calls them shitards, I guess, and find another universe to bother, or I'll blow you up. And he's like, understood, and it's unacceptable, and he ends up grabbing like the ultimate nullifier and hitting one of the buttons. It's like, wait, what are you doing? You're crazy. And he's like, taking what's mine, boy. And he's like, what did you do? What have you done? And he ends up like kind of getting warped through like this. I guess it's a purple hole. It's not really a black hole because it's purple, but I guess the context is the same. Anyway, they end up slipping through the purple hole, and he's like, I'm trying to save you, and Titus is like, I'll destroy you, and he ends up flying back, and hand goes and reaches out, and he's like, guess neither of us got what we wanted, and he turns around and ends up being Rocket and Gamora in these like high-powered spacesuits, and he's like, wait, what? Where have you been? Do you have any idea what I just did? And he's like, looks from the looks of it, you saved the universe, Nova. And he's like, the ultimate nullifier, we'll take it from here for safekeeping. And he's like, no, lesson number one, don't trust anybody. That includes you two. So see ya. And he ends up like flying off. And you know, Rocket and Gamora end up like he's more like his dad than he realized. We should be so lucky. I wonder what he'll do with it. And he ends up going to Watsu and telling him like, I don't know why, but I think this belongs with you. Maybe because if anyone's gonna see something, somebody give coming to maybe because if anyone's gonna see somebody coming to get this thing, it's you, or maybe it's because you were the one who believed in me first. I hope it's okay if I come back and visit with you sometime, Mr. Watcher. And he flies back down to his home. Is the Watcher smiling, and we turn back and here's like this little story about his mom kind of giving birth to him. And he's like, where is he? Promise he'd be here. And she's like, push, Eva, I can see the head crowning. And there's a light, and he's like, sorry, I'm late. She's like, oh, Jesse, the traffic was terrible. Sometimes getting tiny, from one end of this tiny town to the other is like crossing the universe. welcome to the world, Sam Alexander. And he's like, how come you never told me that story? Like, it was your father's story to tell you, but I thought it was time. He's like, don't you? And he's like, you knew all along. Wow. And he's like, what about Kaylin? And she's like, when you think your little sister's ready to know, you'll do the right thing. He's like, me? Why me? She's like, who else? He's like, I don't care that what Titus said. He lied about a lot of things, but most of all, Dad's alive. Maybe he's lost or hurt or whatever. Wherever he is, I'm gonna find him. It's like, I mean, there are only like a billion planets and stars out there in the universe. How hard can it be? And he ends up doing that little like pose dad kind of thing. And there's a little epilogue where you find out that one of the Shataris are holding him um hostage, and he's like, get back to work, and he's like, Sam. But that's pretty much it for Sam's backstory. I don't have much here because I just wanted kind of to give you a backstory on Sam before breaking down my final story for you guys. I had planned on giving you Sam and then finishing it off with a Champions team. The Champions when they debuted were Sam Alexander, Ms. Marvel, Kamala Khan, and Miles Morales' Peter Parker. I figured you guys know enough about Miles. But again, if you guys do want me to do Miles, you can, or any of the coverage characters covered here, Gamora, Rocket, the original Nova, Richard Rider. You guys know where to put it, as well as there was some Marvel news that was just announced. I know all of you guys have probably seen me go crazy on socials, but up next, I think sometime this week, we should be getting I Am Groot, which are the shorts for um the kind of story in between Guardians 2 and Avengers Infinity War. Um, that follows Rocket, and then of course She-Hulk Attorney at Law comes out in about a week or two. I think. I think it comes out on the 10th, or is that I Am Groot? One of those two come out on the 10th. But then also November is the Black Panther 2 movie, which should end off this phase, as well as hopefully we get to see a couple other shows come out this year before it ends. I know that it's almost the end of the year with us being today being the first of August. But I have, of course, plans to talk about Groot as well as She-Hulk in the coming weeks. But I do want to also give you guys a story with the champions because there's a lot of champion stuff, and I actually think they're a pretty good team. They end up having a couple other heroes join them, mainly Vision's daughter, um, Wiccan and Speed join, I think, if I'm not mistaken, and then you also get um, a couple other interesting characters. Trying to remember. Let's see. I think Ironheart joins. Oh, okay. Yeah. I think if I'm not mistaken, I know Ironheart joins. Oh, Hulkling. Let's see. Here's Miles, Ironheart, Viv, Sam, and Kamala. You get young Cyclops to join eventually. That was an interesting story when they brought him in. And then Hulkling, who is not actually, if I'm not mistaken, Hulkling is not Hulk's child. Um, if I'm not mistaken, I would have to read up on this, but I'm pretty sure he's not Hulk's child. Is it Hulk? I don't know. I would have to do a whole story on him. Yeah, Braun, Amadeus Cho. Um, hey, look, card from Marvel Champions. Yeah. I will be doing, of course, a coverage on the Champions team here. It gets really interesting. It's a really interesting tale with the modern Champions team, and then I can of course talk about the old school Champions team with uh Ghost Rider, Hercules, Iceman, or Angel and Black Widow. If you guys do want that, but I do have the full intention of talking about the modern Champions team. Oh, Wasp, Nadia Van Dyne, she's also on that team. Um, let's see here. There's a couple other characters here. I don't know anybody else on this team. Oh, Patriot back here. Um, yeah, I'm pretty sure that's it. Dante Inferno. Yeah, I think he ends up joining the team. Um, X23 Laura McKinney. I'm pretty sure she's part of that as well. Yeah, there's some interesting characters with this, but like the three standout characters are Miles, Ms. Marvel, and Nova, Sam Alexander, which we covered today. Um, so and then Ironheart eventually joins the team, but I do want to eventually talk about these characters. Um, yeah, but that's pretty much what I have for this week's episode. I know it was a little short talking about Sam. He has a this was really just the like a kind of like step into him. He has a lot of really interesting stories. Unfortunately, they're all told on the Champions team. Um, so I will definitely get to a champion story where you guys can see more of three main characters. But that's pretty much it for now. I actually really enjoyed reading Sam's story. It's very much Spider-Man-esque, right? Like a young kid with powers trying to save the world while also going to school. Very similar stuff. But I think there's a little bit more to this because his dad was a hero, his parents know, and he's fighting like space armies. But yeah, if you guys want any other characters, you guys have the links on the in chat right now. The bottom one is the link to the Google form where you guys can vote on whoever it is you guys want. Don't be shy, I'll do whoever you guys want. Um, when I get to it, of course, because I'm probably am gonna end up doing Groot and She-Hulk very soon, and maybe Daredevil if I get around to that. Because if you guys saw or didn't see, he did that little flip at the end of the She-Hulk trailer. It looked like Daredevil was in it. We might, of course, though, have to wait until She-Hulk Attorney at Law comes out. But for now, expect Groot and She-Hulk, and of course a Champions update comic with the three of them. But that's it for this week of Marvel Buddies. I hope you guys enjoyed talking about or listening to me talk about Sam Alexander and his backstory. Feel free to send me messages on the Marvel Buddies Instagram, Marvel Buddies Twitter, or Marvel Buddies email address. Marveling, what is it? Marvelous Marvel Buddies at gmail.com is the email address. It's just posted here. Hold up. I misclicked. Hold up. If you guys can see this, it's really tiny, but this is the email. Um, Marvelous what's Marvelous Marvel Buddies? Is that what it is? Yeah, Marvelous Marvel Buddies at gmail.com. If you guys do want comic recommendations, anything like that, but feel free to vote on the Google form, and the YouTube channel is also linked there. In case you wanted to watch any other episodes, including a refresher on Miss Marvel. It's been a while, but I do plan on doing a Champions team. But that's been Sam, and that's been this week's episode of Marvel Buddies. So, thanks for joining. I'll see you guys next week, Monday. Hopefully, if I don't have another power outage like I did last week. Sorry about that.